Hello, so I'm currently just sitting outside for one of my lunch breaks, and I thought I would just film a video because I don't really do monthly wrap-ups anymore, and I'll probably get more into individual reviews. So I thought I would just talk about some books that I have really been loving lately. So recent reads, recent series that I've fallen in love with that I can just tell you about. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Pachinko. This is by Min Ji Lee, and there is of course the mostly beloved Apple adaptation and TV show. So this really is a epic multi-family generation story about poverty and classism and politics in Korea, and it really did a great job of the interconnections of what it means to be family. So it did a really great job of each character that we follow, but more importantly, it did a great job of kind of as a whole interweaving their stories of what it means to be family and why it's so important, where we come from, our lineage, our history, both individually as a family and in terms of our people. So I would definitely recommend this, but it is a tearjerker. I cried a couple of times reading it. Okay, my dogs are like sweltering as well. So next I'm going to talk about the Ship of Magic trilogy by Robin Hobb. So I'm currently just starting off with book 3, Ship of Destiny, but I've read book 1 and 2, and I have to say I definitely understand why this is everybody's favorite trilogy. I personally connected more with the Farseer trilogy, but I can understand why people gravitate towards this one. I will say right off the bat, it's faster moving. It just has a the magic is easier to understand. It feels more fantastical, and of course pirates. So basically in this story, ships can come alive, and when 3 generations of a family die on the decks of a ship, it then becomes an animate object, and we are following a family as basically the mantle is being passed from the final 3rd generation dying on the deck into the hands of the children. But things become a little bit murky when everybody starts fighting for the live ship. Inheritance becomes a little murky, and suddenly we have the story where maybe the ship doesn't go where it's supposed to. Some people are trying to prove why they deserve the ship, and I can't even tell you, the story goes so much further. I would say book 2 is my favorite thus far. In book 1, it really just is about the live ship. But in book 2, the world expansion is done so well, and also the fantasy element is done so well. Suddenly we're dealing with sea serpents and dragons, and it just, Robin Hobb is such a credit to the fantasy community. And though I feel like a lot of people talk about her, I just don't see this being held, I don't see her being held in such like esteemed praise constantly. And it's definitely worth all of the hype that I've heard about it. Next, I wanted to talk about Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is one that I knew relatively nothing going into it. I just knew that R.F. Kuang is an auto buy for me. So I knew I was going to read it no matter what, but I was a little trepidatious heading into her first contemporary, especially where I didn't know anything about it. So this book takes place where we have it's very complicated. We have an author, June, who is kind of frenemies with a former writing student. They both went to school together, named Athena. Athena is Asian and June is white. And under a certain set of circumstances, Athena passes away, and June finds herself with the ability to take a novel that has been written by Athena, who is critically acclaimed. She has commercial success as a writer, where June is left kind of floundering by the publishing community. And I will say this book is really interesting because R.F. Kuang, there's so many nuances in it. So of course, as we follow the story, there is no ifs, ands, or buts, even in the narration, that June is wrong. But because of the perspective we get, and we're inside June's head the whole time, we have a sort of twisted idea of how she views herself, sort of that idea of everyone's the hero in their own story. I think R.F. Kuang does a really good job of how June is able to self-justify because she is let down in so many ways from her publishers and the dreams she had and aspirations and goals she had. It's easy to see how she connects the dots to victimization and how she identifies as a victim, even though she definitely is the villain of the story. Like, there's in no uncertain terms, the protagonist is the villain of the story. So I would just say, if you can, go into this as blind as possible. I found it was an amazing journey for me to take, not really knowing anything about it. And then the final book I'm going to talk about is Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune. I'm really in my contemporary era, I think. Like, I have been just loving contemporary books that I've picked up recently. And fantasy has been kind of hit and miss. I just don't think that's the mood I've been in. So Meet Me at the Lake is Carly Fortune's second novel. I will say this has been getting a lot less praise than Every Summer After, and now having read it, I think I know why. So Every Summer After last year was a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a little bit hollow, but it was a fun story to read. I believe I read it at the beach. Whereas this one, I rated a 5 out of 5. But I do understand why it's maybe not getting universal praise. I think there's a lot more in this story, whereas Every Summer After, I felt like the A plot was definitely the romance. Meet Me at the Lake, I feel like deals with a lot more, and the romance is an additional bonus. So we're following Fern, who has grown up in a small town. Her mother owned and ran a local resort that was very beloved from not just the small town, but it's a resort that's outside of Toronto, so a lot of the city folk come to the resort, and a cast of characters that she's grown up with and known her whole life. So we're following that timeline, but we're also following in current time where Fern is 32 and she is dealing with the grief of her mother's recent passing, and also trying to balance out the fact that she's a successful businesswoman in Toronto. She's opened a lot of cafes, starting with an independent cafe and opening multiple, kind of growing with the company and growing into a more powerful position. And suddenly with her mother's passing, she finds she also inherits this resort. And Carly Fortune does a really interesting thing of how we struggle with self-identity. So her whole life growing up, when we have her perspective as a young girl, we understand that she has never wanted to stay in this small town. She craves the big city. She wants to go to Toronto. She wants to make a name of herself. She wants something bigger for her life. And jump to the future with her mother's passing, she comes back to kind of settle affairs, and she finds that the resort that she hated so much when she was younger actually holds a more dear place in her heart now, and means a lot more to her now that she's grown up a little bit. And I think that Carly Fortune does a really interesting thing that nostalgia can do to all of us, which is something we might be fighting so hard to get away from when we're younger, so we can break out and discover ourselves and discover our identity and just grow as people, might be the thing that we come back to and it feels most like home and turns out to be our home. So seeing Fern go through this sort of struggle of what does it mean, what does she want, who is she at the end of the day, and coming to terms with that while grieving the passing of her mother and surrounded by this really great cast of characters that are permanent staples at the resort that she grew up on, I have really, really enjoyed. And I will say that the romance as well was really good. We're following Will, who is also a successful businessman, but in the two timelines, essentially we're following her when she's 17, when she's in her early 20s, graduating University of Toronto, and she meets Will, and we're following this whirlwind romance that happens in the span of one day. And we're also following respectively the current timeline where Will as a young man was an artist who's breaking the mold. He didn't want to fit into a box necessarily. Life and circumstances have changed his perspective, and we are reintroduced to Will current day, where he is essentially a businessman. He's in a suit. He's very sure of himself and his success and where he is now, and it's such a stark contrast. But I also appreciated that we saw that personalities and people's goals are not linear in life, and life is complicated, and we can want different things. We can be so different from the people we swore we wouldn't be when we were younger, and it may not be such a bad thing. And I like that we didn't just see that with Fern, we also saw it with Will. So I really appreciated the romance and the room Carly Fortune left for growth in her characters. So I would definitely suggest this, but I will say it's not quite as light and fluffy as Every Summer After was, and the romance doesn't really get started, I would say, until, so this book is just about 300 pages, and I don't think it really kicks off until at least the halfway point. We do a lot of character work. We spend a lot of time with Fern's journey and what she's going through, and if it's motorcycle season, and if that sounds, we spend a lot of time with Fern and what she's going through and just her journey, both inside her head and what she's going through currently. So if that sounds like something you would like, just a little bit more heart with your beach reads, then I definitely would suggest you pick this up. So that is all I have for today. Just a quick little video of things I've been loving that I wanted to share, because like I said, I'm not doing wrap-ups anymore. I'll probably do TBRs, but we'll see. So that is all I have for you today. I'm out here enjoying the sun for my lunch. I'm gonna keep reading an arc that I currently have, and before I get back to work. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.